Thought I might take this opportunity to answer one of our most popular questions on the website or on social media, which is, what do I do with my quilt top once I'm done with it? How do I quilt it? How do I make binding? How do I finish my quilt once I have the top all finished? Now, sadly, I was working on this last night and I didn't think to film any of me doing the sandwich and the basting and the quilting and all of that. I will have to do another video on that whole process. I'm so sorry. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to lay your backing fabric facing down. So the good side facing down. A lot of people will do that on the floor, or I did mine here on this table. You can tape it down if that is helpful to you. And then you will lay that down and then you'll put your batting down. And you can use basting glue. I use a spray basting glue. That can be helpful also. And then you'll put your quilt top on top of that. And again, you can use basting glue if that is helpful. On top of that, I also use basting pins. They're basically like safety pins, but they have a little curve to them. You can use safety pins also. That's fine if you have those on hand. And I put those every 3, 4, 5 inches apart, just to make sure that nothing goes anywhere while I am quilting. So I used a serpentine stitch, which is one of the decorative stitches that I can choose on my machine. If you don't have any decorative stitches, that's totally fine. I didn't have a lot of decorative stitches on my previous machine, and so I just did straight line quilting, and I would stitch right next to all of my seams. Or you can stitch in the ditch, which is basically stitching inside of your seams. This is a pretty scrappy quilt that I did with some jelly rolls, and so I felt pretty free to just quilt it however I wanted. And I didn't feel like I had to be really specific with any kind of pattern. Once you're done with the quilting, you're going to cut off everything that is outside of your quilt top. So once I was done with quilting, there was some extra batting and backing fabric that was out here. And so you can use your quilting ruler and a rotary cutter. You can cut that off. You can even use a ruler that is more of a square shape to kind of square up the edges of your block. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. You can just use some scissors and cut along the edge and cut all that excess off. And then we're going to start working on our binding. So the way that you figure out how much binding that you need is you're going to take all 4 sides and add that up. And then I like to add about 12 inches. That's just my math. Some people do 10, some people do 15. I just do 12. And then you're going to cut that many inches long of 2.5 inch wide. Some people do 2 1/4. I like to have a little bit of extra room, so I do 2.5 inch widths. So each of your width of fabrics is about 42 to 44 inches long. And so let's say you need, for instance, you need 88 inches of binding. You would cut 2 strips of width of fabric. So I need a baby size. This is a baby size. And so I'm cutting 5 2.5 inch width of fabric, and that should be more than enough to go around my baby quilt. And then I'm going to take you over my sewing machine and I will show you how we join them, and I'll show you why I like to join them that way. All right, this is how I like to join my binding. So you'll take 2 pieces and you'll lay them right sides together. I have it pinned here so it won't go anywhere. And then you'll put them together at a 90-degree angle, and you will mark it from this bottom corner of this piece up to the top corner of this piece. And then we're gonna sew right on that line. And then we're gonna cut it off at a 1/4 inch this way. Do that real quick. And you can mark it with a heat dissolving pen or a pencil or chalk, or however you prefer to do it. It really doesn't matter. And then when you open it up, you'll press these open so that they're flat like that. And then that way you have them joined like this. And the reason we do this, here is why I do it this way, is that when you make your binding, you're going to press these in half like that. And then that way you are splitting the bulk of your seam like this. Now, there's no right or wrong way to make binding. If you want to take your binding and you want to join your seams like this, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. There's nothing wrong with that. If your machine can handle that bulk, go ahead and do that. That's okay. I had a machine that couldn't handle that bulk, and my needle wasn't able to handle the bulk and get down and grab my bobbin thread, and I had a lot of skipped stitches, and it was very frustrating to me, and so that's why I ended up just switching to this. So you're going to go through and join all of your pieces like this, and so you can just keep adding one after another like that. Next, you're going to iron all of the length in half like this. Just fold it in half and press it. Now on the front of your quilt, somewhere in the middle of one side, grab your binding and leave about, I don't know, 10 to 12-ish inches. And just set that down somewhere in the middle of that one side. That's where we're going to start. We're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam, and I like to increase my stitch length a little bit, like maybe 2.5 or so. Make sure you back stitch or it will come undone. And we're just going to sew. All right, when you get to the edge there, stop a 1/4 inch before the edge, lift your presser foot, turn it a 1/4 of a turn, so it's like 45-degree angles, and then sew off the edge like that. Then you can cut your thread, pull it out. So it should look like this. You have to sew off the corner like that, and then we're going to fold it back like this. This will make a straight line like this. If you don't sew off the edge like this, like if you stop short there, that's going to unravel. And then when we fold back this way, just like this, so this will make a 90-degree angle like this. You're going to fold it back on itself. And then we're going to start here and we're going to back stitch here. And if you don't do that, this corner is going to come unraveled and your binding will come off when you wash it. All right, now we're facing the right way. We're going to stick it back under there. We're going to back stitch here and sew the next side. So do that process on all 4 sides. When you come back to the side that you started on, leave yourself a good 12 to 18 inches and then back stitch to stop. And then you're gonna cut your tails to where you have a 2.5 inch overlay because you have a 2.5 inch wide binding. And then we're going to open them up and lay them wrong side down like this. And then we're going to twist one side onto the other, just like when we made our binding at a 45-degree angle. Then you're going to mark and pin and sew just like when we made our binding the first time. Just double check it lays smooth. Then sew your hole closed. Backstitch at the beginning and the end. Now, some people like to hand bind. I hate hand sewing, so I like to machine bind. So I iron all the way around. I get a simple glue stick, and then I do a little bit of glue. I fold it over onto the back, and then I set it with an iron, and then it's completely stuck on there. Miter your corners. See, that is a perfect mitered corner. It's so easy. Any beginner can do this. Go all the way around. All that's left to do is sew your binding on from the front with stitch in the ditch. Make sure you backstitch at the start and stop. And when you get to the corner, just get your needle right into that corner and then just pivot your whole quilt. You don't have to start and stop. You can just start your next side. Both sides at once. So here's what it looks like on the front, that little stitch in the ditch, that pink line where we went all the way around. You can barely see it. So the stitch in the ditch from the front has gone over to the back and has caught the binding from our back, and that's what this looks like.